Puerto Rico, 1966. Norman Cousins was a writer, but he was writing on topics that were quite unusual. So it was no surprise when he decided to interview the renowned cellist Pablo Casals for a chapter in his book called Anatomy of an Illness. Norman was fascinated at the ways that music can open up pathways for healing. Now, the cellist Pablo Casals was a worldwide name, household name, and his career had spanned decades, but now the cellist was nearing his 90th birthday. Cousins arrived at the Casals villa in sunny Puerto Rico. However, he was stunned to see Casals in such a decrepit state. He had always seen Casals on stage and on television, vibrant, healthy, and now he found Casals stooped over. He writes in his book that the various infirmities Casals had made it difficult for him to dress himself. As he was trying to walk into the room, he was hobbling. He was suffering from a stage of rheumatoid arthritis, and his emphysema was evident in his labored breathing. Finally, he hobbled into the living room on his young wife's arm. He was so stooped, his head pitched forward, and he walked with a shuffle. Pablo's hands were swollen and his fingers were clenched. And then Pablo Casals headed for the piano, as he did every morning. And here, Norman Cousins bore witness to a remarkable transformation. He writes, "I was not prepared for the miracle that was about to happen. The fingers slowly unlocked and reached towards the keys like the buds of a plant towards the sunlight. Pablo's back straightened. He seemed to breathe more freely now. Then his fingers settled on the keys. He started with opening bars of Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier and played with great sensitivity and control. He hummed as he played, then said that Bach spoke to him here, and he placed his hand over his heart. Then he plunged into a Beethoven concerto, and his fingers, now agile and powerful, raced across the keyboard with dazzling speed. His entire body seemed fused with the music. It was no longer stiff and shrunken, but supple and graceful and completely freed of its arthritic coils. Having finished the piece, he stood up by himself, far straighter and taller than when he had come into the room. He walked to the breakfast table with no trace of shuffle, ate heartily, talked animatedly, finished the meal, then went for a walk on the beach." What does this story tell us? Not only about the power of creativity, but also the power of releasing these sounds into the atmosphere. Did you know that the sound of the birds in their song early morning releases a stimulus into the air, vibration that opens the flowers and the stamen so that they could be pollinated? Without the song, the initiation of that energy, it would be a different story. So what is it about music that wakes us up, that even heals us from inside out? And is there a code that the great composers knew, such as Beethoven, that releases this energy? And how can we tap into it? How can we understand it? And how can we utilize it for our greatest living? Welcome to Music to Compose You, where the timeless melodies of classical music intertwine with narratives of personal transformation. I'm Margaret Wacyk, a Grammy-nominated concert pianist, author of 2 books, and creator of the Golden Tone Technique piano method. And I'm thrilled to be your host. Join me each week at my Steinway piano on a journey through the symphonies of life, we explore how the power of music shapes our stories, ignites our passions, and leads us towards profound inner growth and physical healing. From the gentle cascades of a Bach prelude to the triumphant crescendo of a Beethoven sonata, each episode will resonate with the melodies of our experiences, inviting you to discover the transformative magic of classical music. The composer Beethoven wrote that music is the one incorporeal entrance into the higher world of knowledge, which comprehends mankind, but which mankind cannot comprehend. Isn't that such an odd thing that some higher knowledge could be accessed from music about us, but we are sort of blind to it, deaf to it as it's happening, but it is rewiring us from inside out. And as anybody who has been moved to tears from a love song knows, there's something about those sounds, the lyrics, that just penetrate those heartstrings and cause an emotional trigger response that cannot be accessed as quickly in other ways. So we know that music is powerful, but in this episode, we're going to explore how music can do that, or at least we're going to take a stab at it. We'll never know, and it's better that we don't know. But I do think it's important to have the conversation about the different aspects of music and try to understand this language a little bit better. And the reason for us doing that is not as an exercise in Music Education 101 or music appreciation class. It's actually for opening the door to higher states of being. And when we understand the codes we are hearing, we can initiate and engage with the music in a different way. And by doing that, we actually do transform. So in this episode, which is part 3 of the Passion for Life series, focusing on Beethoven and elevating above the ordinary, we're going to actually go in front of the piano today and hear some things and explore some interesting sounds and try to answer some of the questions. Like, one, what is about music that some sounds we find them beautiful and some not so? Some sounds seem to really affect us on an emotional level and others not. So this is something known as aesthetic emotion. We're going to talk about that. We're going to also explore, is there a code that composers such as Beethoven use to generate feelings and responses in us? And how does that work? What is behind that code? And this is something called the law of the affect. And we're going to learn a little bit about this law, which was from the 1700s. And on a personal note, I'm going to share my story, and total disclosure. At a point in my student life, I had absolutely no liking for the music of Beethoven. In fact, I didn't want to play it. My teachers would force me to play it. I didn't get it until one piano lesson totally changed that for me. It was an extraordinary class, and I'm going to share a couple of the things that I learned that fateful day that completely changed not only my understanding and my appreciation for Beethoven, but it changed my whole approach to music. And lastly, we're going to take all these things that we'll learn today and put them into practice with an exercise of deep listening and engage with one of Beethoven's most beloved and popular piano pieces. Why do we need music? Well, the answer is we don't. We actually don't really need music to survive, because it's not part of the essentials, right? We need water, food, shelter, and those kinds of things. And music is not one of those essentials, but yet it is essential. Music is a mystery. Like Victor Hugo said, music expresses that which cannot be put into words and that which cannot remain silent. I love that. The pleasure we get indisputably from a work of art or from listening to music cannot easily be related to our biological needs. And humans developed with a particular sensibility to certain sequences of non natural sounds. And this is known as aesthetic emotion. So, the best way to tap into aesthetic emotion is to hear it. And so, we're going to jump to the piano right now, and I'm going to play a harmonic progression, which is used in, I would say, about 90% of every song you will ever hear. This is a harmonic progression known as the descending fifths. And a progression simply means a series of chords that flow well together. And what does that mean, to flow well together? It means that one naturally feels like it will go to the next, which will then go to the next, and so on down the board. So let's take a listen. So this is a descending fifth progression. Basically, I was going from C to F, B to E, A to D, G, back to C. And if you're into the Roman numerals, that was 1, 4, 7, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. A very straightforward chord progression, but it's amazing how composers utilize this, and pop songwriters did too. So I would like to show you this chord in different contexts. Let's start with Mozart Sonata in C, a tiny fragment where he utilizes this chord progression. Let's just get that chord progression in our ear one more time before the Mozart. And here's the Mozart. That was from Mozart's Sonata in C major for the piano, K545. Let's hear it in different popular songs. If you're a Frank Sinatra fan, you'll surely recognize this one. Here's the chord progression. And now, here's the song. Of course, that was Fly Me to the Moon. What about another autumnal favorite? Here's Autumn Leaves. One last example, one of my favorite songs. Can you guess it? Oh, yes, I Will Survive, Gloria Gaynor. I can't tell you how many teary night I've spent listening to that song, trying to recover from many a romantic breakup, but I digress. What an array of songs and pieces of classical music that use this famous chord progression. I use this as an example just to show that there are certain patterns that we recognize as being coherent, cohesive, pleasurable to the ear. And the way that harmony flows, chords flow from one to another, is really about eliciting feelings in the listener. Composers knew that they could apply these sequences and that they would produce very powerful effects or just simply be wonderful to listen to. Which brings us to the question, what makes a piece of music pleasurable and what elevates it to something transcendent? Could they be both? These are tough questions. And according to J.W.N. Sullivan, who wrote a book about Beethoven and his spiritual journey, he wrote that some works of art are better than others, but it is also possible for a work of art to be perfect. What are these qualifications? According to him, he said that for a work of art to be close to perfect, it must excite the aesthetic emotion to its maximum. The music also has to have a way to relate to us as a humankind and illuminate a large body of experience for us. We are all humans, we all suffer, we all cry, we all have joyous moments as well. This is why music is the universal language. It speaks to our hearts. But what qualifies someone like Beethoven, for instance, to do this? To be able to speak to humanity through these dots on a piece of paper, these notes, and to have people elicit great emotion, to have these experiences, even of transformation. What makes him qualified for that? One theory is that the composer has to have a large body of experience from their own life to pull from. A lot of maybe difficulty, hardships, suffering that gives them a relatable point of view. And so the music tells a story. Or perhaps, judging from the fact, you could say, well, how could they have had that much experience since most of them were very young and also died quite young? So how much experience did they have when they were 17? In a case like Mozart, for instance, to be able to write such mature music but not yet have that body of experience. Perhaps it's something else. Is the artist given a unique spiritual gift? Are they imparting as a vessel something to the listener? The great poet Goethe has a lot to say on the subject of Beethoven in response to a letter that was written to him where Beethoven purportedly said, quote, "I know very well that God is nearer to me than to other artists. I associate with him without fear. I have always recognized and understood him and have no fear for my music. It can meet no evil fate. Those who understand it must be freed by it from all the miseries which the others drag about with themselves. Music, verily, is the mediator between the intellectual and sensuous life." And it's here that the famous quote was made from Beethoven's lips, saying that music is the one incorporeal entrance into the higher world of knowledge, which comprehends mankind, but which mankind cannot comprehend. So what was Goethe's reaction to this? Well, he had a very interesting point of view. He wrote, quote, "The ordinary human mind might perhaps find contradictions in what Beethoven wrote, but before that which is uttered by one possessed," now he's calling Beethoven, "possessed by such a genius, An ordinary layman must stand in reverence, and it is immaterial whether he speaks from feeling or knowledge, for here the gods are at work strewing seeds for future discernment, and we can only wish that they may proceed undisturbedly to development. Unquote. So there might be, and quite often is, another thing at work here, a spiritual revelation communicated to the artist, because a work of art may communicate knowledge the same way that an MRI scan communicates knowledge, the same way that a letter communicates knowledge, or a book. It may indeed be by revelation. The higher consciousness of a great artist is evidenced not only by their capacity for ordering their experience, but also by having their experience. Which might say something or might not. I mean, we are all human beings having experiences in the real world each and every day. So is it their particular experience? Well, Sullivan says at the end, it's not. It's not about the actual experience the artist communicates, but something deeper. Beethoven does not communicate to us his perceptions or his experiences. He communicates to us his attitude based on them. We may share with him that unearthly state where the struggle ends and the pain dissolves away, although we know but little of his struggle and have not experienced his pain. It is indeed our own universe, but as experienced by a consciousness which is aware of aspects of which we have but dim and transitory glimpses. But my favorite take on this topic comes from the book, The Secret Power of Music by David Tame. Highly recommend this book if you are interested in diving deeper into these topics. But David makes this assertion, which I've always sensed as a musician. Personally, this is just my own opinion. Everybody's entitled to their own. But I always sensed that music, as far as classical music goes, I've always sensed, for me personally, that after Rachmaninoff, which was very early 1900s, that for me felt like that was the last vestige of the classical approach. And then after that, we got into Schoenberg and the 12 tone, and that felt more, I don't know, something different. Definitely very different. And emotionally, it felt different as well. I felt disconnected from that music, whereas from Bach to Mozart to Beethoven to Liszt to Rachmaninoff, it was a very different experience. And I always had a certain way of understanding it. It was very emotional and it was spiritual, but it wasn't until I read David Tame's words on this that I saw the point. And he puts it so beautifully. But he says that until the early 1900s, so the classical school of music, it was the emotional direction of the music had been vertically upwards. Now, what does that mean? It means that the very purpose of the music had usually been to direct the feelings to God or to regions of lofty altruistic contemplation, whereas the music of the 1900s and onwards was considered the new music, directed the feelings along a merely horizontal plane. The music evoked the reactions of one mortal to another or to the material environment where they live. That is just so well put in my view. It became art for art's sake. It became art for let's make a statement on the way things are, or it became very mentally and intellectually focused. And even those chord progressions that we listened to before, which come from the natural order of the way music works and thinks and has its being. There is a logic, there is a law to harmony, which all the great composers understood. And even all the great songwriters got it. They used these formulas, and to great effect. They worked. And there's a reason it works. It's because it's connected to the natural order of things, the same way that the sun rises and the sun sets and the phases of the moon and the seasons and the natural rhythm found in our environment, in nature itself. Well, music also has that. And we talked about this in episode 1 when it came to Pythagoras and the ancients and what they knew. I'd like to pivot and tell you about a piano lesson that changed my whole viewpoint on music and its meaning. But first, take 2 symphonies and call me in the morning. Those are the words expressed by Elena Manis in her book, The Power of Music. My friend, let me ask you a question. Have you been using the power of music in your health and wellness journey? If not, then there's no better time than now to jump in. Because we live in a modern time that is filled with noise, where finding peace and clarity can sometimes seem impossible. However, by tapping into the notes of classical music and the timeless messages of wisdom found within, we have a powerful transformational tool that we can use today. But you might be thinking, well, classical music has never been my thing. How do I connect to it? How do I listen and actually like it, engage with it, and have it be a reflection of my feelings and emotions? Welcome to the Music to Compose You podcast. Here we connect the dots, bringing together the beautiful masterpieces of classical music, the stories behind the compositions, and the composers that wrote them. The benefits of classical music are sky high. From reducing stress and anxiety to boosting concentration and creativity, classical music harmonizes your mind and body, elevating your everyday experiences. And you can try it right now. Feel the soothing melodies wash over you, improving your mood, enhancing your cognitive abilities, and promoting restful sleep. Let the melodies of Mozart, Beethoven, and Bach be your companions on a journey to wellness. Download Sound Sleep, a collection of soothing piano masterpieces that soothe your nervous system and harmonizes the brain, creating an atmosphere of peace just perfect for bedtime. Try it by going to musictocomposeyou.com, and while you're there, be sure to join the newsletter where I share the latest behind-the-scenes footage of the podcast and access to special events, concerts, and goodies reserved just for subscribers. So thanks so much for being part of the Music to Compose You family. We are embarking on a fun journey. I'm so happy you're here for the ride. Let's let our soul song sing and see what this music reveals to us about ourselves. One of the first pieces of music, serious pieces of music that I learned as a student was Chopin's Nocturne in E flat. And it knocked my socks off when I heard a recording of Arthur Rubinstein playing it. And I listened to it nonstop, and I guess I was just starting piano. Maybe I was in my, I don't know, maybe I was like in my second year of piano or something like this. And I brought it to my teacher, and she said I wasn't advanced enough for it. I couldn't learn it. But it was summertime, and I figured, you know what? I had nothing but time, and I would take it apart note by note, and I would learn it. And I did learn it. And I brought it to her in September, and she was pretty amazed that I did it. But I loved this piece, and the reason I did was I loved the melody. The tune, it just broke my heart. And I was attracted to music that had gorgeous, sumptuous melodies. In fact, give me a slow movement of a sonata and I am in my comfort zone. It's been like that for a long time. I'm so happy playing melody. So when I started to learn Beethoven, I was like, where's the melody here? I don't hear a melody. I felt very much out of my element. Let me give you an example. So here's an example of the Chopin E flat nocturne that I learned as a kid. I was around 19 years old when I was learning Beethoven's late sonata, Opus 90 in E minor, and I just didn't understand this piece at all. It was difficult, it was abstract. I again was looking for melody where I felt in my comfort zone. I really couldn't find it. To me, this music felt very fragmented and I was confused. Here's an excerpt of the beginning. As mentioned earlier, this is a late Beethoven sonata, and Beethoven's late works are characterized by truly their fragmented and otherworldly nature. It's as if he's already on the other side communicating with us, and it leaves us still over 200 years since the writing of this music puzzled, and it's completely new and it's completely fresh. So there is so much in it. It's also music that is a bit of a mystery. One thing that is very mysterious about it is the expressive markings. He writes a very long expressive marking, which is the manner in which he would like it to be played. It's all in German, which is unusual because usually musical expressive markings are in Italian. But it's very interesting to note the detail that Beethoven wanted. And I am not going to botch the German. Thankfully, I have a husband who is German. And here's what the music says.
Mit Lebhaftigkeit und durchaus mit Empfindung und Ausdruck.
What does that mean?
With liveliness and still expressiveness and sensitivity.
That's very detailed, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
So all these things add to the complexity. What does this music mean? What is the mystery of it all? Why is it so fragmented? At the time, I had a teacher by the name of Mordechai Shahori. Having a great teacher is one of the greatest gifts that a musician can have, or anybody for that matter. And I was baffled and amazed at the way that he took this music and illuminated it for me. He sat down at the piano and told me that every note has a meaning, and started with the first note. The first note we spent probably about 2 hours on how to play the tone of the first note. He explained it to me that in all music, and Beethoven no exception, the first note starts the journey and it has to be exactly right. And then we talked about the fragmented nature of this piece. I asked, where is the melody? Why is this so abstract? What does this mean? And here was the lesson he shared with me. He said that there's some music and some composers, for instance, Chopin, that write music that is about the human emotional condition. And truly, if you listen to Chopin, there is so much emotion in it. He said, for composers like Beethoven, they have something else in mind. What they are after expressing is more than human emotions, although that is part of it. They're writing about nature and the elements. It is elemental energy. And he explained it also has to do with the cosmic order. And again, that goes back to our first episode about Pythagoras and this idea of the harmonia mundi, that there is the harmony of the spheres, that there is an order, a mathematical logic that is reflected in music existing in the ratios between the planets. And it's so amazing because as this sonata, Opus 90, continues, listen to what happens next. Those opening octaves were so abstract to me. At that lesson, I asked, what are these about? Why does he suddenly shift into octaves? It's like he goes into a completely different gear, and we are just in the first minute of this piece. And he explained that this is where we get into the universe and the divine harmony of the spheres, which blew my mind. As you could tell, these weren't normal, everyday, mundane lessons. It was a lesson in music and so much more. It was a spiritual approach to understanding the music, and I was so lucky to get that exposure. These octaves, just to play you that excerpt again, I'd like to do a side-by-side comparison between these octaves and the opening of a movie that you will probably recognize, and there is an interesting similarity in both. These are octaves, which means they are 8 notes away. So the bottom note is an E, and the top note is an E as well, 8 away, preceded by a B, back to E and B, going up. That relationship is a relationship of a fifth, which is a perfect interval. An octave is also a perfect interval. And there's one other interval called a fourth, which is also perfect. Now, we're not going to get into the difference between perfect intervals and the other intervals, but sufficient to say, perfect intervals are not emotional in nature. They are elemental in nature. And you can hear that they really are defined. Again, another interesting parallel is that this interval is the same interval as we heard before in that chord progression of fifth motion. So there is that elemental universal underpinning behind all of this. And this is what is fascinating, because this is the transformational invitation this music has in these codes embedded inside. Perfect intervals take us to the infallible laws of nature, whereas the emotional intervals, an interval defined as the distance between two notes, emotional intervals describe the human condition and feeling. So we have these two interesting, different polarities between our world, their human experience, and the cosmic experience around us, the universal experience. And it's this molding of the two that all composers do, but especially Beethoven. He brings in the universal with the human emotional. And I do believe that this is what gives it that transformational quality. Now, you will probably recognize this opening theme from a famous movie about space. Notice the similarity with the Beethoven octave. So here we are listening again to the Beethoven octaves from Opus 90. And here's the opening from that space age film. Same octaves, same intervals, same recipe. This is written by Richard Strauss, and it's most known as the theme from 2001, A Space Odyssey. What is so curious is that Richard Strauss wrote this about 100 years after Beethoven, and we have a similar gestalt to describe this feeling of space. And again, it's using that recipe of the perfect intervals. What other recipes did composers know throughout the centuries? Well, we'll talk about that and the law of affects. Did you know there was a lexicon developed of different musical moves and gestures that composers used either consciously or subconsciously to evoke certain feelings? We'll talk about that in a second. In the hustle and bustle of modern life, finding balance and inner peace can seem like an elusive dream. But what if the key to harmony has been within us all along, resonating through the ages? Introducing the transformational power of Heaven's Melody, a downloadable audio track of the 7 ancient solfeggio healing frequencies paired with biblical scriptures. These powerful sound waves, used by ancient civilizations for thousands of years, are known to promote physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. From reducing stress and anxiety to enhancing focus and creativity, these frequencies harmonize with your body's natural rhythms, bringing a profound sense of calm and clarity. You have probably heard do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, or do, a deer, a female deer, and might have thought that those are just syllables without meaning. For a long time, I thought it was just gibberish until I found out that each of those syllables, do, re, mi, and so on, are tied to the Latin, and each of them have a spiritual significance. For instance, the third one, mi, stands for miracles and transformation, and it is linked to the frequency 528, known for its restorative effects. I have been using that frequency for over 10 years, and I could truly attest there have been some amazing healing miracles that I have seen happen with those, and countless people have downloaded this throughout the world, and I have a ton of testimonials of people that have seen great benefits. Experience the benefits of improved sleep, reduced pain, and a deeper connection to your inner self. Be confident that the sounds you are hearing support your faith as you steep in the pure frequency merged with the power of scriptural word. Feel the ancient vibrations cleanse your mind, body, and spirit, rejuvenating you from within. To listen, learn, and download, visit musictocomposeyou.com/heavenmelody. So we'll now pivot to something called the doctrine of affects or affections, which sounds even nicer. But it was a theory developed and popularized during the Baroque era, and this was applied to not only music, but painting and theater. But it's most well known in music. And what is this theory? Well, it states that composers can use musical procedures to create music that evokes specific emotions in listeners, such as involuntary emotional responses. Can you imagine what power there is in that? We talked about in the first episode Pythagoras changing his tune on the harp he was playing and preventing a man from murdering his neighbor by just changing the tune. Well, composers have a lot of tricks up their sleeve that allow them to really manipulate our moods and affections. So, the doctrine of affections can be traced back to ancient Greece and the teachings of the temperaments. We have 4 temperaments, each of which is associated to separate affections. So we have sanguine, which is associated with love and joy, choleric, which is associated with anger and fury, melancholic, associated with sorrow and pain, and phlegmatic, which is peacefulness and moderate joy. I like that. Moderate, not extreme, but moderate joy. And how this is used in music, one way is by keys. We have 12 keys in music, and we can create chords on each one of those keys. We can create major chords and minor chords. And so in the law of affections, they actually wrote out specifically what mood each key elicits. So let's take a look. C major, rejoicing. C minor, sweet but sad. D major, stubborn. D minor, serious. E flat major, pathetic. E major, the fatal separation of body and soul. E minor, pensive and grieving, but not without hope. G flat minor, distress, abandonment. G major, persuasive and brilliant. G minor, grace, kindness, loveliness. A major, gripping and clear. A minor, honorable and calm. B flat major, magnificent yet modest. B minor, hard, unpleasant, and desperate. And in Beethoven's Appassionata Sonata, which is the work we'll be diving into further next week, we will hear the push and pull between 2 different keys. F minor, which represents deep depression, funeral laments, almost a longing for the grave. And that's contrasted by F major, which in the doctrine of affections is associated with fury, quick temper, and deep anger. Now, are these hard and fast rules? No. And in fact, F major is often used in other contexts. In fact, Beethoven uses it in his Pastoral Symphony, where it represents purity and countryside and a real idyllic scene. Nevertheless, the doctrine of affections is a good pivot point to reflect on the nature of certain keys. Why do composers choose them? And what implications do they have? Another aspect of the doctrine of affections was its use of intervals. Intervals, which are the spaces in between the notes. As we looked at before, we talked about octaves, perfect eighths, perfect fifths, perfect fourths. Those are intervals. And intervals have a lot to say symbolically. Under the surface, they mean something. So what do they mean? Well, large intervals represent joy. In fact, especially associated with upwards motion. Think of this song. Somewhere Over the Rainbow starts with one big fat octave reaching for the sky. You can think of it as reaching for a rainbow. It already sets the tone of hope in the song. Let's take another melody, a beautiful yet poignant and sad and heartbreaking melody. This is written by the composer Gluck from the Baroque time, and it's from his opera Orfeo and Eurydice. This aria expresses Orfeo's grief and lament. Eurydice, his beloved, is gone, dead, and he must go to the underworld to try to find her. According to the law of affections, a composer should use small intervals to represent sadness. And that's exactly what Gluck does. Again, these aren't hard and fast rules, but they do make a lot of sense. The reason is they mimic our own human voice. When we are excited about something, our voice leaps up. But when we are sad, despondent, depressed, our voice slopes down. Big leaps in octaves also have an energetic difference. They are energetically more alive and dynamic. Why? Because it would take a singer a lot more energy to expend to create an octave, to sing an octave. But small steps going downwards, small intervals, descending or even ascending require a lot less energy. And so there's a hidden implication here also in terms of hope equals more energy, depression, sadness, lament, low energy. Let's listen to an excerpt from the aria from Oreo and Eurydice by Gluck. Could you hear the difference in the mood, in the intervals, in the setting? Big difference. Key choice was one difference between the two. Another difference was the choice of intervals to express a mood. And a third choice was the tempo, the speed, and other artistic decisions. If you're a piano learner of any age or level and feel blocked in your playing, I have some good news for you. Do you get tired of hitting the same notes over and over again? Does your progress feel stagnant no matter how much you practice? Worse yet, do you feel disconnected to the music you're playing and starting to feel tension creep up your forearms, hands, and shoulders? For many piano players, poor technique and tension can hold them back from reaching their full potential. But fear not, because there is a solution. Introducing the Golden Tone Technique, the revolutionary program designed to unlock your true potential and transform your playing. You'll learn proven techniques to release tension in your body, allowing you to play with greater ease and fluidity. The Golden Tone Technique is an integrated body, mind, and spirit approach to piano playing based on archived methods from the 19th century. On a personal note, I'm a classical pianist, and my road to Carnegie Hall was far from simple. Because of tendinitis, at age 19, I had to stop playing completely. I thought I would never fulfill my dream of becoming a concert pianist until I discovered an archive method and approach from the past that was based on the power of piano tone. When I learned this secret, it released all the tension in my body and allowed me to express myself in a way that I hadn't known possible. It was the ticket to true pianistic freedom. A big problem in modern piano playing methods, the kind usually popular on YouTube, is that they follow a more is more approach. Whether it's the promise of learning 10 songs in 1 week or racing to play scales as fast as possible, they miss one crucial part of the puzzle. When you know this secret, it unlocks a world of joy at the piano, where you connect to each and every note, playing with a newfound ease, accuracy, confidence, and creativity. Try it right now with a 3-part free video training on musictocomposeyou.com/golden tone. Here's some testimonials from people that have watched this free training. Mick from Australia said, "I can't describe in words what I got out of these videos. In fact, it was like a blockage was released. It was so special to me." Joel from South Carolina said after watching, quote, "I started playing better almost immediately. I highly recommend this." Rodney from Washington said, "Margaret's enthusiasm, passion, and knowledge provided me with new musical skills I thought I would never achieve." Break through to the next dimension of your piano playing, no matter what level you are at, and have dream experiences at the instrument every single time you touch a piano key. To experience it today, watch the free 3-part training on musictocomposeyou.com/golden tone. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. To listen deeper requires a little bit of backstory, and I hope that you've enjoyed our exploration of topics today, such as the law of affections. We also talked about this idea of aesthetic emotion. What makes something great, especially when it comes to music? Where does this inspiration come from? Is it from the composer's reservoir of experience, inspiration, talent? Or is it also an ingredient that is hard to define? Is there a divine aspect to it as well? We talked about the vertical versus the horizontal aspect of the compositional process. And I hope you enjoyed my story about my piano lesson that changed it all for me. The difference between music that is expressive of the human condition and that which is also expressive of the state of the universe, a divine organization and harmony. So if you like this episode, stay tuned to next week's broadcast, where we will go even deeper. We're going to crack open the first movement of Beethoven's Appassionata Sonata. We'll apply some of the aspects we talked about today, and we'll go even deeper to try to get at the hidden meaning and the transformative invitation that this music gives us. Thanks for joining, and please visit musictocomposeyou.com for more information about the broadcast, free downloads and wellness playlist, Heaven's Melody, ancient frequency tracks, as well as free tutorials on the golden tone technique piano method. So lots to explore. I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you next time. Take 2 symphonies and call me in the morning. Those are the words expressed by Elena Manis in her book, The Power of Music. My friend, let me ask you a question. Have you been using the power of music in your health and wellness journey? If not, then there's no better time than now to jump in. Because we live in a modern time that is filled with noise, where finding peace and clarity can sometimes seem impossible. However, by tapping into the notes of classical music and the timeless messages of wisdom found within, we have a powerful transformational tool that we can use today. But you might be thinking, well, classical music has never been my thing. How do I connect to it? How do I listen and actually like it, engage with it, and have it be a reflection of my feelings and emotions? Welcome to the Music to Compose You podcast. Here we connect the dots, bringing together the beautiful masterpieces of classical music, the stories behind the compositions, and the composers that wrote them. The benefits of classical music are sky high. From reducing stress and anxiety to boosting concentration and creativity, classical music harmonizes your mind and body, elevating your everyday experiences. And you can try it right now. Feel the soothing melodies wash over you, improving your mood, enhancing your cognitive abilities, and promoting restful sleep. Let the melodies of Mozart, Beethoven, and Bach be your companions on a journey to wellness. Download Sound Sleep, a collection of soothing piano masterpieces that soothe your nervous system and harmonizes the brain, creating an atmosphere of peace just perfect for bedtime. Try it by going to musictocomposeyou.com, and while you're there, be sure to join the newsletter where I share the latest behind-the-scenes footage of the podcast and access to special events, concerts, and goodies reserved just for subscribers. So thanks so much for being part of the Music to Compose You family. We are embarking on a fun journey. I'm so happy you're here for the ride. Let's let our soul song sing and see what this music reveals to us about ourselves.